Ladies and gentlemen, this is Martin Steed, and welcome to another edition of Sisters with Superpowers, where we bring you in front of these sisters who have all the power, who have created safe spaces with benefits. I tell you, this young lady literally has a vision that we may not have had her for us or for ourselves until she's going to give it to us today. Nomsa Khalfani is PhD, doctor, you guys. Be sure to say that. She's earned it, and we want to welcome you to Sisters with Superpowers here on Rolling Out. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How about yourself?
It's a beautiful day to be in front of a sister that really is making a difference in the world. Kind of give me an idea. Why and how did you move into this space for our families, and why is this work part of your purpose?
Good question. And I will say I fell into it. And when you talk about this space, you're talking about sexual and reproductive health care. So for me, as a Black woman, as a mom, as a daughter, I think information about sexual and reproductive health care is key and important. We should have it. We should have access to those services when, where, and how we need it. It should be done with respect and dignity. And we shouldn't be we shouldn't, be criminalized or shamed for really wanting to know the spectrum of care. So whether I'm deciding to have children or not, family planning and contraception in between, or if I decide to terminate a pregnancy based on what makes sense for my life. So that's why I do the work I do. I want my daughter, future generations to have the information that is needed to make really good choices for themselves as they move forward.
We're in a moment that the rights of women are besieged with controversy. I will say it in that way. What would you say if you were actually giving the speech at a Howard or a Spelman about being sure that we're resistant to giving away our rights and the rights of women and understanding this moment that we're in?
I would say the first thing is, in this moment isn't new for us. This moment isn't new for Black folks, right? Roe has been the floor and not the ceiling. So even though it was the law of the land, depending on where you were, if you were in the South, you having access to decide what you wanted to do with your body wasn't always available for you. You either had to leave the state, or if you couldn't afford to leave the state, you then may have been forced to decide to maintain a pregnancy that you may not have wanted or could afford, or would alter and impact your current kind of life journey. So I think, first of all, we need to understand that it is the floor, not the ceiling. Two, it is your decisions about having a child or not having a child impacts education choices for you, impacts economics for you, could potentially impact where you live, right? So it is the understanding of all of those things. So it's beyond just your bodily autonomy, but it is also about your future and how you want to live your future and the decisions you want to make. So what do we have to do? Because there's no easy answers, but we need to understand who we put in office and the long game of that, right? Because we have folks in office now that are not thinking about the future for me, my future generations, and women that look like me. And these are mostly folks who don't have children. They don't have, they are not designed in this world to give birth, but they are making decisions about our bodily autonomy. So it is about understanding what's available. It's about who we put in office. And it's also about being proactive in talking about our needs and wants and how we want them. There's a whole medical structure, infrastructure, or institution that needs to be changed, right? In terms of how we are even treated, not just as it relates to abortion access, but even just like our care when we're carrying a pregnancy or have to make a decision about not because of health issues and how we're being listened to. So it's about listening to Black women, it's trusting Black women, and also letting Black women lead.
I love that. Leading and Black women in particular winning. There has been a movement, obviously, from Black women to discuss this, to actually push. We've got a VP, Kamala Harris, phenomenal woman. And yet it still seems as though the health protection and the health disparities exist. What can our community do? And obviously you teach policy and the likes, but what should we do about advocating for ourselves? And how can we better advocate? How can I better advocate for the women in my life as a brother and support them on their journey?
I think what you just said is key, including men in this conversation. I think a lot of it has been the focus of, well, women need to talk about what women need and want, but we are also part of partnerships and families and extended families. And that support is necessary. I mean, one of the things we do know is when women have a social circle that supports them during pregnancy, they have better outcomes. And so that same level of support needs to be carried out in just our general healthcare. So I would say, for starters, include men in these conversations, right? They should not be left out. And when it comes to Black folks, there needs to be that intersection, right? Because what happens to the other impacts? What happens for women impacts men and vice versa. And then we think about disparities. A lot of it has to do with just the myths that exist about us. Like, we can tolerate pain better, more than other folks. Like, you stick a needle in me, is gonna hurt just like you stick a needle in somebody else. But I think it's also about seeing the humanness of us on the other side of that provider in that brick and mortar, or on that screen if it's telehealth. So it's the human connection that needs to happen. And I think the more we push for recognizing our whole person when we come into these spaces, hopefully we start to see something different. I think the other thing I want to raise is that we as Black folks by ourselves can't change what is happening. And so it is also about building power with allies. Not that we're saying we want somebody to ride in on that white horse and save the day, but how do we together cross these intersections and strip this vision of power and privilege, right? So if we want to center those on the margins, then folks with power and privilege are gonna have to let go of some of that power and privilege. And that doesn't mean you go with nothing, but if you don't see me in the issue, then I'm invisible. So you can't be my ally if you don't see me in that issue that politician or that other ally is speaking up about.
I love that. Allyship is key, and recognizing the role of allies for young sisters who are literally just starting on this journey. Say you're 18 to 35-year-old, and what would you share with her if you were that sister whisperer about what she needs to do about establishing a health protocol and practice for herself?
I wish somebody would have whispered in my ear, you can ask questions. It is okay to go see a provider, a social worker, a therapist with questions, right? And if you don't feel like you got to remember everything on the top of your head, make a list, but ask questions. I think the other thing I wish somebody would have whispered in my ear is to be my authentic whole self. And it is okay to be my authentic whole self, especially when it comes for what I need and how I need it, because nobody's in my shoes, right? And so being able to make sure you have information so that you can make an informed decision about what makes sense for you. And then create a circle of support, right? Of folks that encourage you, not just the people that are, your cheerleader, but they're not going to challenge you. They're not going to ask you to ask yourself different questions, but they really are there to tell you when you're wrong, but also encourage you when you're right. And just make sure that if you're missing anything, they have and can provide support. Because we're not in this bucket and basket trying to fight each other. I know that's sometimes the image of Black women, but that's not been my experience. So I think it's also letting women, young sisters, know that there are other women that can support them through in this journey, because there are going to be all kind of barriers that are set up for them. So it's like, how do you navigate through those challenges?
Well, I think that brings us to that point. You're a young sister. You really have never asked for mentorship. You really have never asked and had a woman share. How should young women who obviously watch and see Sisters of Superpowers know how to build a relationship with a gynecologist? How to talk to a sister that might be a nurse, just so that those other things that she can have access to and create a health circle so that if she wants to improve her health, she doesn't feel ashamed. I'm 200 pounds. I want to get down to 150. And somebody who will say, you know what, it might be 3 years, but we can get to where you want to be together, and develop that relationship with that dietitian, that nurse, and then your doctor. So it's a whole health circle.
Yeah. And it may be that they're not doing that alone. It may be that they are going to that visit with someone that they also trust outside of that could really help them communicate to their gynecologist, to a nurse, to a dietitian, what their needs are, what some of their struggles are, what are their barriers. So then you are creating a plan that actually can be sustained by that person. And so one of the things I would say is, don't be afraid to bring somebody along with you, right? So that if there is a trusted person that they are typically going to, include them in those medical visits. Because a lot of times you think you have a plan, then you get in that exam room or with that meeting, and then you feel like, oh, I can't ask them this question because, they may think about me a certain way, or maybe they do have a degree, but then they feel embarrassed about asking the question. So bring somebody in with you, practice, but let them know on the other end that at the end of the day, you are trying to improve your life. You want to be around, you want to be able to enjoy life. And so opening up those conversations and not being afraid. And I think just as a community, we have to talk more about the issues that happen over our lifespan. I think there's conversations women need to be having more frequently, just in general, across the life spectrum.
You think of triple negative and mammograms and really the reality of what sisters are besieged with, on top of having to be a mother at the same time. How do you navigate that emotionally and keep your health without feeling ashamed? I'm having a moment. This seems really heavy. Not only do I have some health issues, the health issues are creating a health issue in my head. How does she navigate and find help in your type of organization and other health organizations?
I would say, first of all, we have to get to a place to normalize having conversations when we feel that things are, too much to handle, right? I think a lot of times we've grown up with this thinking of, well, you go to church, you pray, you talk to your pastor, but sometimes you need to be talking to somebody outside of the brick and mortar of that religious institution. And I think also we have to move away from this myth of Black women being superwoman with a cape, because then I think we then are producing some additional stressors on ourselves, that we have to be strong and can handle everything. And we don't have stress. We don't have depression. We don't get lonely. And as we start to normalize that reality, then I think we feel more comfortable to talk about those blue days, or when, you know what, I didn't work, I got to go home and take care of these kids. We got homework, we got food, but I need a moment. So how do you create that with other family members or with your girlfriends who may also have kids? How do we tag team, right? I was a single mom raising my daughter, and there was another mom. Our girls did cheerleading, but we shared pickups. We shared going to practice and picking kids up. We shared dinner, but that was my lifeline. Yes, I had my mom and other family members, but that connection with that other mother helped me get through lots, right? Stresses at work and other things. So I really believe in creating a support group to help you just deal with everyday life, right? Because life be lifing sometimes, and you just need to have somebody support you. And it's nothing wrong with talking to a therapist. I think that's the other thing. We got to normalize speaking to someone that is outside of our inner circle that actually may give us a perspective that we may not get somewhere else, right? I'm a licensed therapist, and I had to do my own therapy as part of my training and learning. And I think being able to talk about the value of that gets us closer to talking about mental health in a way that we don't always talk about.
Well, I think when we start talking about life and sexual reproductive life, shame, guilt, religion, all of a sudden it comes in the room.
Yes.
How should a woman approach the mental exercise of getting insightful help when she's at that moment where she's having to make a decision in her heart and her mind, but the truth she needs to get through? Can you share how you do it where you're at so that we can allow those who may not even have access to what you provide in a California, but might be in a place where she needs to know how to find that help and not feel ashamed that she might want to terminate or something else before someone else gets in her head and makes her destroy her life without even thinking about it?
I mean, I think a lot of it is like who you center yourself around, like who, again, goes back to who's in your circle. And again, I think we don't always grow up with having a mentor or someone, but there's typically somebody in our life where we felt like we could go to. And that might be the person you start off with. I have a sister group of girlfriends that have been in my life at different stages. I'm an only child, so I have my chosen sisters. One of them I've known since I was 13. Another one I met in college. And then my other sister I met in my first job. Those ladies are really my circle, and that's who I go to for lots of different things. And then I have my professional circle of girlfriends that, all come with their different skills and information, and I will go to them for resources, right? Or to talk something through. So, it's like, I feel like sometimes I'm a broken record, but I do think having a sister circle, and I'm not saying it needs to be 10 people. I'm not saying that's the folks on Facebook that are following you or on Instagram, but these are the people that, if you needed something, you could pick up the phone and call them, right? Those are the folks that you may not talk to every day, but they have your back regardless. That's the circle of folks that I encourage young folks to create, right? And it may evolve, right? Who might have been your go-to people as a teenager may not be your go-to people at 20 and 30, but you have a small circle, and it could be 2 to 3 people. It could be one person, but that's who you go to. My mother had her girlfriend, right, that she always would call. And that was the image and the reminder of that's who I want to make sure I have outside of my mother or cousins, that I have that go-to. And that's that's what I recommend. And in terms of health issues, get a second opinion, right? Be okay getting a second opinion, especially if you didn't feel like your needs were being met. It's okay to follow up with another provider and to make sure that you are being heard and seen fully during those requests.
So I want to keep going down that request. The young lady is knocking on your door. Mm-hmm. She is trying to make a determination on where she is. What does she experience when she gets to knock on that essential access health champions, thank God for that word, when she crosses that threshold? What should she know that she can experience, and how open should she be to being able to be honest about where she's at on this journey?
I think a lot of it is creating that environment of trust, right? So if the person on the other end is not feeling like they can trust or that they're not being seen, the information is only going to go so far, because the hope is that the information and resources that are being shared will actually get translated into practice. And so we are not a direct service provider, but we do train and support direct service providers through money, through training, through technical support. so that there's no wrong door. So we hope that any provider, that somebody from that looks like me, who lives in the communities that I live in, when they walk through that door, they're getting their needs met. And even if the end of the day, they don't know exactly what they want to do, they at least have the information that they can sit with and then be okay. Because we want no one to receive sexual and reproductive health care and they feel shame for their decision. But it is really about their going in, getting the information so they can make a decision that makes sense for them. And that decision could be that I want to move forward with this pregnancy. So what does that mean? What is that care that I should expect? Or right now, this doesn't make sense for me. I just got accepted into college. I want to fulfill that dream of college, and maybe this is something later. So not only are they being talked about or being getting information about their options, because it doesn't have to be termination. It could be adoption. It could be, there's other options for them, but they're being educated about what that is. And birth control, right? Contraception. So it's not just that we're going to talk to you and you learn your options, but all right, if you decide you don't want to continue this, let's talk about your birth control options that make sense for you going forward. That's the care we want anybody walking through the door to get.
So you speak of birth control. Mm-hmm. How important is it in given the ton of ways now, how important is it for moms to have that conversation? And when should that conversation begin to find its way into the conversation between a mother and a daughter, an aunt and a daughter, just to talk about reproduction and protection and obviously birth control?
I mean, I think the conversation should be broader than just thinking about having sex. And I think a lot of times that's when the conversation comes up, right? There's this, let me have this birds and bees conversation with my daughter because I want to make sure she doesn't get pregnant. I actually think about the conversation should be developmental, right? So as young folks are developing, there should be conversations about their bodies, the changes that are happening with their bodies, so that they understand when their menstrual cycle begins, what that means and what occurs emotionally and what they need to be doing over time. When emotions come up, because it's natural to be attracted to a boy or even a girl, right? So it's like it's natural to have these conversations about those feelings. And so that when they may not be ready, but at least they have the information. So then when they think or if a feeling, emotion comes over them, they are then protected, or at least be equipped to have conversations if they don't feel like they're ready. But if we wait until they are 15 to raise the topic, in most cases, we're too late, right? So I think it should be an evolving developmental conversation. And it doesn't have to be with their parent. It can be with another trusted adult, but someone that they feel comfortable having a conversation with, right? Because depending on the generation of their parent may not even be comfortable having the conversation, right? And so it is like helping parents feel comfortable about the topic. So if they don't feel like they're able to, they can direct that to another adult that they feel like can have a conversation, or creating the environment and space so that their young folks know that there is someone that they can talk to. And if they don't feel like they can talk to another parent out of their family circle or friend circle, how do they have a conversation with a provider, right? Because the provider should also be starting to have developmental conversations with their teens, pediatricians as well.
Well, I thank you. I just, you've taken me through the whole cycle, the pre-woman, the existing woman, and now the sister with superpower woman. Dr. Khalfani, I want to thank you for being on Sisters with Superpower. Did a phenomenal job educating me. Hopefully it educated our audience on what our choices are so that we're providing that essential access. And we have health champions who promote quality sexual reproduction health. So thank you so much for what you do. And thank you for being a sister with superpowers.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.